In Skinner's view, operant conditioning did not require mental processes. It is simply the natural response of an animal to an outside reinforcer. Skinner was convinced that most behavioral learning occurs in this way, with no mental processes involved. However, not all psychologists agreed with this view. Two of them were famed psychologist Albert Bandura and his colleague Mike Mahoney. In an experiment that went straight to the dogs, they set out to demonstrate that external rewards alone could not account for all learning, and that internal processes also play an important role.
Mike Mahoney and I decided that we could demonstrate that we could teach animals to be self-regulators. And so they were given full control over those rewards rather than having them dispensed by the experimenter. And then in the true spirit of the Protestant ethic, we taught them that they should work before they reward themselves. So we have a study where a doggy enters a room and goes to an electric typewriter and types, and then goes over to the refrigerator and looks at his big supply of meat morsels and takes only one, and then goes back and does more typing. So this dog really supports a lot of productive activity without anyone being in the room regulating his behavior.
But Albert Bandura was not the earliest psychologist to believe that Skinner's theory did not tell the whole story. Others also felt that mental processes must play a role in learning. The first experiments to explore this were conducted by Edward Tolman, who discovered the phenomena of cognitive maps and latent learning.
In the classical latent learning experiment, animals, rats, were put in a maze and allowed to wander around with no reward. Right? No reward. So they couldn't be learning anything according to any kind of a theory that says reward is necessary for learning. They couldn't be learning anything because they're not rewarded. Then one day after they've had a number of trials, you put food in the gold box and you say, now what will they do? Well, what he found is that the next day they behaved just like animals that had previously been rewarded on every single trial. So that demonstrated that learning had occurred, but it was hidden or was latent until it was drawn out by the reward.
Let's watch Elena do that again. Her arms aren't here. Right?
Latent learning is also at work in humans. For example, during rehearsals, a dancer is supposed to learn certain steps so that she can perform her part of the overall routine. However, she may learn the role of another dancer just by watching the repeated performances, even though she receives no reinforcement for doing so.
Okay. How about something they could do better? Okay, let's switch groups.
Dancer A may have no reason to demonstrate what she's learned unless dancer B can't perform for some reason. But if she's asked to step into the new role, dancer A will probably find that she already knows most of the routine. Tolman also found that when he made a change in a maze they had already learned, rats could easily make an adjustment. They had formed a cognitive map of the maze similar to what humans do when finding our way around town.
As you drive through town, you develop not a literal map, but a cognitive map of where you have been and where you're going, and it's this map that you use to do the navigation. If you like, it's an internal representation of the world. That is what guides the person who's driving from work to home in the evening, not the specific contraction of specific muscles in the past, but rather the muscles that may need to be contracted in a particular way at this time because of the map that people have in their head about needing to go from here to there in order to get there.
The principle of cognitive maps can be applied to many situations, including a dance performance.
You may learn how to dance on a particular size stage, and then for another performance, you may move to a stage that has a different size and a different shape. And what can be done is to use this information about relationships. And this relationship information is what is transferred so that performance can be effective. Now, this is done all the time in professional dancers, all the time, because they move from city to city with their dancers, and every place they go has a different size stage, and yet they perform their performances because they can contract and expand because they have this internal information about the relationships in the learning, not just the exact movements.
5, 6, 7, and 1.
Classical and operant conditioning tell us much about the role of direct experience in learning. However, much human learning occurs indirectly by watching and imitating others. This is called observational learning, and dance is a perfect example.
Well, observational learning is a process whereby people acquire attitudes, values, new ways of thinking and behaving by observing the actions of others and the consequences for them. You can waste a lot of time in trial and error, fumbling, and then many mistakes and errors can be highly costly. They could be even fatal. So modeling enables you to shortcut this process by drawing on the competencies around you.
Observational learning, or modeling, begins very early in childhood. Babies as young as 3 weeks imitate tongue movements they observe in adults who play with them. As every parent knows, as babies grow and develop, they will continue to model the behaviors of the people around them. It's important to keep in mind, though, that observational learning is not simply a form of imitation. Cognitive processes are involved.